if you want to stop crime, let me tell you what actually works. And I've spent 10 years fighting for this. You target the bad guys. You target the criminals, the felons, the fugitives. You prosecute them, you put them in jail, you get them off the street. And you also enhance security at vulnerable targets. So I've introduced legislation repeatedly, and I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, I stood on the Senate floor and tried to pass legislation I've introduced that would double the number of police officers in schools, that would fund $15 billion. Okay, look, if you want to have a reasonable conversation, we can. I mean, if you want to yell at each other, we can. But if you actually look at the legislation I introduced, would have spent $10 billion to fund 15,000 new mental health counselors in schools. Because if you look at the troubled young men who commit these horrific crimes, more mental health counselors there could help hopefully stop them and identify them before they commit these horrific acts. I stood up on the Senate floor to pass this legislation. The Democrats objected. Chris Murphy stood up, the leading Democrat for gun control, and objected and said, no, we shouldn't enhance school security. The Democrats' interest, if they're not taking away firearms from you, from law-abiding citizens, they have zero interest. And by the way, you ought to watch that debate. I would encourage you, like, go see. You can go watch it go Google it and watch it. I stood up and laid out, if we want to keep our kids safe, and I desperately want to keep our kids safe, the most effective step we can do is have police officers there to protect them, who can intercept a mass murderer before he gets into the school and stop them. Okay, you're right. It didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? Because when that lunatic got to the school in Uvalde, there wasn't a police officer on campus. He was able to get in an open back door. He got into the classroom and was murdering kids before the police got there. And if you want to stop him, look, if you have a solution to stop the deranged, evil murderer, I'd love to hear it. My solution is throw him in jail and stop the felons, the fugitives, those with mental illness, stop them before they commit these crimes. There are some we won't know about beforehand, and the single best step to stop them is have armed officers on campus that can stop them before they kill our kids. But look, instead, you guys can instead sing Kumbaya with them and hope they'll just stop. But what you're proposing doesn't work.
Well, at least it's not like Ted Cruz just got booed in Texas. What's that? Oh, this was in Texas. Oh. Here's Ted Cruz speaking at the Texas Tribune Festival, getting met with boos when he explained that his plan to stop school shootings is simply placing more police officers in schools, because that's the problem, not enough weapons. Why stop at police officers? Why not a small military unit? Maybe some tanks, machine guns, mobile command units? And I get that that's ridiculous, but at the same time, when Republicans like Ted Cruz pretend that the only thing we can do is confront mass shooters only when they're in the act of committing the shooting, they're basically conceding that what they want is a war zone in our schools. So maybe, and I'm just spitballing here, we stop the shootings before they happen. Maybe instead of just pretending that we're helpless only until the bullets are flying, we take even a single step to try and stop these attacks before they happen, before kids have been killed. Republicans love to pretend that there's nothing we can do, which ignores the fact that there is an absolute ton we can do. It's what other countries are doing and why we are the only country on earth where these things happen. Here are some ideas. Universal background checks, nationwide red flag laws, raise the age to buy all guns from 18 to 21, ban assault weapons. We act like this is a crazy idea, as if we didn't have an assault weapons ban in place as late as 2004. Most of you watching this video were alive at that point. The only thing that's changed here is that, surprise, surprise, the Republican Party has gotten more extreme, and so at the same time that the number of shootings has surged, the number of Republicans willing to take even a single moderate position on guns has all but disappeared. But let's not pretend that it's just their extremism talking, because it's also the money. You'll likely not be surprised to learn that Ted Cruz himself received the most donations from gun groups of any member of Congress. So when you hear him espouse positions like this one, where apparently the only solution to stop mass shootings is just to start stacking law enforcement officers in schools like the front entrance is the beach of Normandy, it's not because he actually believes that's true, it's because he's being paid to say that that's true. It starts to make a little more sense once you accept that Ted Cruz is motivated by nothing other than his desire to be in power. And that means doing and saying whatever he can to keep those NRA checks rolling in. What's especially ridiculous is that in Ted Cruz's own state, the last major mass shooting in Uvalde literally did have law enforcement present. And not just one, like Ted Cruz's bill that he introduced would have presumably required. Not 2, not 10, not 50, not 100. There were a total of 376 officers who responded to the shooting, and yet the gunman remained at large for over an hour. Like, I'm sorry, but I just have to repeat that. 376 officers responded to the shooting, and the gunman remained at large for over an hour. So when Ted Cruz sits there and pretends that sticking an officer in a school is going to stop these shootings, I honestly don't know what the fuck he's smoking. And that's just one of the absolute ridiculous excuses cooked up by the right as a quote-unquote solution to mass shootings. We've heard that it's because the doors are unsecure, we've heard of violent video games, each excuse more ridiculous than the last, and each excuse ignoring what is so blatantly, clearly at fault here. It is the proliferation of guns in this country. It's the guns. It is the killing machines that you can get in many states without a moment's delay. It's the thing that sets us apart from every other country in the world where, miraculously, there are no mass shootings. Those countries have doors, they have video games, they have mental health issues. What they don't have is AR-15s readily available for kids. And so maybe we recognize the extent to which these Republicans are acting in bad faith. And maybe we recognize that their quote-unquote solutions aren't real solutions, they are just lazy talking points intended to placate people at the behest of the gun lobby, whose sole objective, by the way, is to sell more guns. So yeah, I wonder why a politician who takes money from the gun lobby, whose only job is to make money selling guns, might not want to offer a solution that includes limiting the sale of those guns. One of life's great mysteries. It's also so interesting how Ted Cruz loves to pretend that limiting the sale of AR-15s to kids is somehow akin to stripping our freedoms away. First of all, we already can't do whatever we want in this country. We can't walk into a movie theater naked, we can't drive 200 miles an hour, we can't set the supermarket on fire. So let's not pretend that any restriction on total freedom is somehow unprecedented. We live in a society, there are rules, that's how it's always been. When Ted Cruz tries to pretend that this is some slippery slope, he is lying. But second, while we're on the topic of rights, what about our right not to get shot in a school, at a concert, in a church, at a casino, at a synagogue, at a grocery store? Maybe the people who we should be looking out for in this country aren't the people who are growing their collection of military-grade weaponry, but rather everyone else whose lives are put at risk from it. Republicans love to pretend that they represent the silent majority. I can guarantee you that the actual majority of Americans do want to see common sense restrictions to guns. In fact, 3/4 of Americans support raising the minimum legal age to buy a gun to 21. That's what Americans actually feel, as opposed to the nebulous, elusive, imaginary American who Ted Cruz is referencing, who views dead children as a necessary compromise to be able to have any gun at any age, at any time, with no restrictions whatsoever. When he pretends that that person is the silent majority, yet again, he is lying. And finally, one last point. Ted Cruz loves to beat his chest about being tough on crime, and yet by burying his head on the sand on guns, he is allowing crime to happen. He is making it easier for the next mass shooter to buy that gun with no license, no background check, no delay. So he'll wail about BLM or migrant caravans, but compare the number of Americans who've encountered a migrant caravan or a BLM protest to the number of Americans who've been impacted by gun violence, and then tell me which crime is more serious, because I can promise you that it's the crime that Ted Cruz is helping enable. So good on the crowd for letting Ted Cruz know how they really feel, although it won't change his mind, because Cruz doesn't govern based on the will of his constituents, he makes decisions based on his own pursuit of power. So unless you're writing him a check as big as the gun lobby is, your boos won't change his mind. They will, however, serve as just one more piece of evidence that Ted Cruz and the party he's in are too extreme to be in power. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.